Why does Augustine say that our hearts are restless until they take rest in you, and you here is God? Why does he say this? It's a famous line from his Confessions, and I must admit this is probably, not just probably, it is my favorite book of all time. I've read it more times than I can remember, and I'm currently rereading it and teaching through it. And I thought it might just be useful to have a brief reflection on this very famous line. You stir men to take pleasure in praising you, because you have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. This line at the beginning of his Confessions, this famous book of Western civilization, this famous book of theology, and this famous book of, you might say, soul psychology, of Augustine's retreat from God into the world and return to Him through, essentially, Him not pursuing God, but God pursuing Him the entire time. Well, in essence, Augustine believes that life apart from God is restless by nature. A little later in his book, he talks about falling in with the Manichaeans, a group of religious people who dedicated themselves to sort of being freed from the body through special eating of food and all this kind of stuff. But as he gets into this form of teaching, he begins to say that as I focus on these phantoms, these myths that they created, which are not even good enough, they're just representations of the real world, not even the real world itself, it's even worse. He says, I had become even more exhausted. Later in the book, or another place in the book, he'll say that unless we find rest in you, or when we rest in you, we will have rest. So he has this sort of dichotomy between our restless, exhausting existence and a restful, peaceful, stable existence. It recollects something, perhaps, in Plato's Phaedo, where Plato describes life as this circle of pleasure and pain. The pain of hunger leads to the pleasure of food that releases you from that pain. But soon again, the pain of hunger returns, and the pleasure that we get from eating is only there because that pain is there. And Plato describes all of life like this, and it's one of the reasons why, as a philosopher, he wants to be released from the body and through this endless cycle of pain and pleasure. And it might be that Augustine is thinking about something like that. But what I have found with Augustine is that people are much too ready to go to Plato or Plotinus or any of the Neoplatonists and just say, well, he must be copying them. I don't believe that at all. He did read them, we know that from Book 7 of the Confessions, but I actually find that his sources are often not there, and they're almost certainly focused on the Bible and the Christian tradition in which he was formed, as well, I grant, with the modern science of their day and the philosophy and so on. That's obviously there like it would be for anyone. I can't talk about gravity or the law of thermodynamics today without being part of the physics of today. Likewise, he can't talk about things without mentioning the physics or philosophy of his day, which was common. But what's going on here, I think, is something more like what Ecclesiastes says, that life under the sun is vanity. All that we do, all of our work, doesn't seem to amount to anything. It is distracting, exhausting, and it doesn't appear to provide what we hope it provides. It is vanity. Vanity, vanities. Like a breath that comes out of the mouth, Ecclesiastes says, and that dissipates quickly. Which is why, which is maybe one source for Augustine's view of evil as nothing. Evil is like a breath, it comes and goes, and it's actually nothing. Although more explicitly, Augustine ties this to creation. Everything that God was created is good, therefore God did not create anything that is evil, and so we must not say that there is a created thing that is evil. For he believed that for a long time, that there was a cosmic battle between God and evil, two physical or substantial things at least. and that the cause of sin was an evil substance that sort of came in and tricked us or made mistakes, and we made mistakes, which is also actually admits that while he was a Manichaean, he thought God could make mistakes like that. But that can't be the case. Now, more specifically, wherever his sources for this thought comes from, to me it's clear that it's from creation, everyday experience, things like Ecclesiastes, but in particular, his reflection through memory of how he lived his life apart from God. And in his readings of the Psalms, which this book is full of, he sees constantly that God is stability. He's our rock. He is unchanging. The universe, the sky will be rolled up, but God will never change. And he finds that, in particular, when he has a close friend who's unnamed in the book, who gets sick and ill to the point of death, then eventually is baptized, and shortly after does in fact die, Augustine becomes completely distraught as he reflects on how things that come into being go out of being, how things that begin to live begin to die, how everything seems to change from life to death, etc. And if you try to find happiness, peace, stability, structure in these things, well, what ends up happening is that as they go out of being, so your stability goes out of being. If you rely on a job for your fullness of happiness, and the company is downsized and you are pushed out, well, then your happiness goes with it. The vagaries of weather and of life itself are uncontrollable. There's a fundamental uncontrollability about the world. It's actually a book title whose author I can't remember at this second. He recognizes that. And so he knows that God has actually made us for himself, as he says in the beginning line that I read. God, you have made us for yourself. You have made us not to be satisfied in the good and beautiful things that you created alone, but rather these things are instruments or pointers or signs to you who made these things. And we're made for you so that we're made to finally find our peace, our stability, our rest, our happiness, our beatitude in God who made us. And that is, in short form, basically what he means by the line, you stir us to take pleasure in praising you, because you have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. One brief caveat I should probably mention. Taking pleasure in God is important, because if we take pleasure in God's created things apart from God, we would then exchange the glory of God for the much less glorious objects of this world and four-footed animals and so on. Those are good things to appreciate and to love, but only because they exist, because the Creator made them exist. With that, I am truly done. Thank you for listening. I will likely post a video on maybe each or many of the books of Augustine's Confessions. I probably won't summarize the whole chapter or anything like that, but likely I'll just pick one of the key themes in each of the chapters or each of the portions of the book that I find helpful, and I will return, and you will have more Augustine. Thank you so much. If you could, do subscribe. It does help. Helps me, encourages me, but it also, I think, probably long-term helps videos have visibility and all those sorts of things. I'll see you next time. Thanks much.